This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com. This show is brought to you by IndyWrestling.us. Check out IWC, RWA, and more. Click the Fight TV link on WrestlingMayhemShow.com to support this show and watch pro wrestling, MMA, boxing, and so much more. And listeners like you, support this show at patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show.
Hungry as fuck, but I ain't starving yet. Chain for the pain, cocktail bar set. Never said I was a gangster or thug, but I'm an animal. Feeding for the taste of the blood.
Hey guys, it is the Indy Mayhem Show. Mike Sorg at Sorgatron on the Twitter. Video producer, podcaster here in the Pittsburgh area with the Wrestling Mayhem Show and IndyWrestling.us. This is a show where we talk about indie wrestling with people in and around the business of it. And in Pittsburgh, a lot of Pittsburgh, of course. And it's going to be a very Pittsburgh-based show as we start digging into a lot of the old stuff around Pittsburgh wrestling. And, of course, please check out everything at WrestlingMayhemShow.com, where you can find old interviews that we've done, and some 180-odd some interviews with the Indy Mayhem Show going way back a few years, and they're all very listenable. As long as you know, as we were discussing before, as long as you know as it wasn't a recent one, right? But anyways, please subscribe to the Indy Mayhem Show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and of course Google Play podcasts. You can not miss an episode of what we're doing here, and catch us video version of the Wrestling Mayhem Show YouTube and Facebook page, and we go live there over on the Facebook page. And lately for this show, especially if we have it by itself, over on IndyWrestling.us's Facebook page. And please keep an eye on the events on Indy Wrestling and Wrestling Mayhem Show on Facebook, because you never know where we're going to pop up. Like how I'm completely in a sunny window here trying to do the podcast. Man, we need blinds in the studio. But I'm really excited to have our interview for today. He's going to be doing a history of pro wrestling in Pittsburgh class at CCAC here coming up. We're going to get into the details with that. But thank you. Announcer extraordinaire is how I know him as, Tom Leturgey. But I know you've done a lot of stuff around pro wrestling, and I hope to get into a lot of it. Thank you for joining me here in the studio.
Thank you. Should I call you Mike or Sorg? Which do you
Sorg.
prefer?
People would call me Sorg.
Or
in
you
this
can call
show,
me
typically.
Trapper.
Trapper.
That's good.
Trapper. I'm going to have to adjust your title now.
It's a pleasure to be here. And before we officially get started, I want to salute you for setting roots in a city neighborhood like Beachview, a small business owner, putting your money where your mouth is, putting money into the community in the city of Pittsburgh specifically. You should be applauded for staying here in the city. You know, you can go anywhere, and you decided to go in the city, so that should be applauded.
I thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I truly believe like a Pittsburgh podcasting should have a place in Pittsburgh. So,
oh yeah, absolutely,
of course. So
I used to be an editor of a community newspaper. We talked about that. We were based in Carrick. We were over here in Beachview, Brookline, a lot of those neighborhoods a lifetime ago now, but I'm very familiar with Beachview and a lot of these city south neighborhoods, and it's good that people are investing, much like Mike the barber next door. A lot of people, the moose down the street there, it's always good that people are investing where they live and do business.
Isn't it interesting? You know, I know we're going to get into a lot of like kind of, you know, some history of wrestling, but isn't it interesting? And this is kind of things, you know, I'm working on a studio wrestling documentary. One day we'll get that thing done. And, you know, that kind of, you know, you find wrestling fans everywhere. You like, I you know, set up here and realizing I have the Latin assassin next to me.
That's right.
Another wrestler. And I was in there talking about his old Jimmy Superfly wrestling stories and everything like that a while back and everything. And, you know, it's really, really cool.
Yeah. When I parked here, I looked up, and lo and behold, I parked right in front of his barber shop. So I went in and said hello before I came over here, and it's just dynamic that the small world of professional wrestling in Pittsburgh is literally a wall apart.
And yeah, exactly. And for those wondering, yes, the Latin Assassin is on the get list for an interview in the near future.
He would be a terrific storyteller.
Oh, yes.
He's been around a long time, has a lot of stories.
That might be one of those hour episodes, as this one may be as well. So, but anyways, you know, we kind of have a break the ice kind of question as usual. So for you, what was your earliest memory of pro wrestling?
Well, it's a story that I love to tell. Is I was always a superhero kid. I was a comic book kid, and my mother was a reader. And my mother came to me one day, and it was in the early 70s, somewhere along the line, and she showed me a Reader's Digest article, and she said, there's a man out there that he has a ring, and you can put a 50-cent piece in his ring. And just talked about the enormity of Andre the Giant. And to know that there were people like that walked among us. I'm from a little town in between Johnstown and Altoona in Cambria County. If you're 6 foot tall, you're a 7 foot taller in a kid's eyes. But to have a guy like that walking the planet was really fascinating to me. And then I spent most of my childhood outside. I really didn't watch television. We didn't have cable in the sticks back in the day. I really wasn't familiar with TV wrestling until the early 80s when cable came to Portage. And some friends had it, and we stumbled upon it. And then somewhere along the line, I saw this guy in Rocky III. And I saw a guy that accompanied Cyndi Lauper to the Grammys. And like, who is this enormous Hulk Hogan? And that was coincidentally the time of Hulkamania. And of course, watching Late Night with David Letterman, you're scared to death as a kid because you see Jerry the King Lawler pile drive Andy Kaufman in this grainy footage out in, Americana somewhere. And then, Andy Kaufman throws coffee in the King's face, and they cut to a commercial because it seems like bedlam's breaking out in the Late Night with David Letterman studios. And that's really my introduction into wrestling. Then cable came, went to college in 1986, and we would go to the common area and see if NWA was on Wednesday, 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. So that's really where it began for me.
I love, so you got to see, like, kind of as they were happening there, like a lot of the things I hear about, because I mean, I know for me, I was, again, no cable, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was just, I didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
And you got to see at least like the outskirts of that you could.
Oh, sure. People ask, because of the class, people said, well, what did guy asked me yesterday, what'd you do? Did you watch studio wrestling? First, I was 5 when it went off the air. And no, my mother was the one who told me about George the Animal Steele, because she visited a friend in Beaverdale, Pennsylvania, that they would watch studio wrestling. And that's where they saw George the Animal Steele. So it's ingrained, this story that my mother shared with me as a young girl discovering this, and I had the opportunity to meet George the Animal Steele many years later and tell him that story, and he was very appreciative. But to be able to go to a common area at California University of Pennsylvania in 1986 and sit down and watch the Horsemen attack Dusty Rhodes in a parking lot like it was happening, it almost blows your mind, because they make it look good. It looked like a snuff film at the time for a kid in college. So it was very exciting, and it was. It always depended on the mood I was in, whether I was a WWE guy or WWF at the time with Hulk Hogan, or what I thought was a more grittier product with the NWA. And they're both great looking back at them.
And that's great, because we have a lot of, especially younger wrestlers, younger fans on the show, on the Wrestling Mayhem shows. And people that didn't experience even the Attitude Era, and remembering like what that was like to be in the middle of the NWO and DX and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and you look back now and watch a Raw from that era, and you're like, it was all right, like if you didn't experience it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I feel like that's also happening. Like, we hear the stories about everything you just described, like that's whether access or age. That's out of my range, and I hear about like, wow, was it really that great? I feel like I've seen that before. It's like, these are the people that did it first, right? In these kinds of things, and that's what I think attracts me to the studio wrestling thing. Is not, if I go watch a match, I'm probably not going to be as excited about it. But hearing everybody tell those stories is the most interesting thing. I'm going talking about Wrestling Mayhem Show and the promotions that we work with, and everybody's like, Jumpin' Jimmy DeFazio and the Keystone, or the Carnegie Cop, who I got to talk to recently, Bruno Sammartino, and of course everybody about Bruno and Dominic and everything. And I've had the fortune to meet all those guys, and all super guys.
Unbelievably nice guys. One of the highlights of my career was going to Amsterdam, New York in 2012 in the car with Lord Zoltan, Dominic DeNucci, Bruno Sammartino, and a couple of others. And just to be able to be on that 9-hour road trip, listening to Dominic and Bruno rib each other and tell stories and talk about the old times and answer questions. I have a good friend that, did you ask him about this? Did you ask him? It's like, no, I sat and listened.
Yeah.
I listened to these guys talk.
Absolutely.
And I had a great personal experience with Bruno, because going up in 2012, Bruno's around 80. So, he doesn't look like the guy from the 1959 or, 1971. And you would walk into a rest stop along the New York Turnpike and people wouldn't recognize Bruno Sammartino. And then you would come out of the bathroom and there would be a food court there. And Bruno would say, "Pizza. I haven't had pizza for a long time." Then he would shuffle off and get a slice of pizza. And then we would go to another rest stop. He would come out, same thing. And he'd go, "Ice cream. I haven't had ice cream." So then he would enjoy some ice cream, and then whispers would be around that his wife didn't know, So I ratted out Bruno about pizza and ice cream, but I think that it makes for a good story.
So how did you get involved in the world of wrestling? Obviously you're watching this stuff,
Yeah.
and now of course you're an announcer and you're doing road trips for Bruno and Dominic and things like that. What's the bridge in there? Is wrestling something you always wanted to get involved in some fashion? Like, what was your gateway?
Well, the funny thing was, I had known about Lord Zoltan through a friend of mine, Drew Gordon. Drew and I went to college together. And he lived closer back in the day, and we went to a Norm Connors show out on Route 30 in Irwin, the side of a pizza shop. And I saw Lord Zoltan, and Mick Foley, who was on television, won the IWC tag belts. And I'm like, how does he win in the IWC tag belts when he's on television? And I got to talk to Mick at intermission, and Mark Madden was there. I got to talk to Mark Madden, and I knew that it existed, but I really didn't. I always loved wrestling. I'm 5'8". I used to weigh a lot less. I could have been more athletic at the time, but I didn't realize that there was this training available. And then you live your life and you have jobs, and then my wife and my son. You just don't make that kind of commitment. So, but I knew that it was out there, and I would go to an occasional show, but it never really dawned on me that I could get involved. And then I started to talk to the now owner of the Keystone State Wrestling Alliance, Bobby O, and Bobby was involved in the KSWA, and I kind of knew a little bit about this, and he would tell me about the shows. And of course, the very first question I asked was, "Do you ever have any big name wrestlers there?" It's always the first question that people ask, as well as you well know. And it was always, we have guys from the Pittsburgh area. So my son and I started to go, and I inquired about helping to set up the ring, just to be involved in any way. And I went to a couple of shows, and I really liked what the product was, and I let Bobby know. And lo and behold, Bobby was taking over ownership of the KSWA, and he had been doing the ring announcing at the time. And he had asked me, "Are you interested in being the ring announcer for the KSWA?" And I said, "Yeah." And, it's like, I would do it for free, but don't tell them that. You know what I mean? So that's where it began.
That's awesome. That you rolled with the KSWA train at that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, it became something that I was able to become involved with, and I was able to use my talents as rudimentary as they may be to be a journalist. And, I decided somewhere along the line that this is a professional sporting event, just like the Steelers, just like the Penguins, just like the Pirates. I'm going to write about it. So that's the impetus of the reviews of the shows and the features, and just to be able to write about the product as well as broadcast about the product. So that's how that began.
That's awesome. So what was kind of the world of what you kind of wrote and everything like that? Was it a lot of was it just around KSWA, or was it like kind of broadly around wrestling?
Really, it became. I've done some broader stuff about, but I focused on the KSWA, much like folks focus on their own Steelers, Pirates, Penguins, that sort of thing. But I have written about a broader. At one point I had a column for the UK's largest pro wrestling site, and then that went defunct, and it kind of that ended that. And then I've written, some of my stuff has been in OneWrestling.com, World of Wrestling, things of that nature. One of the things that I liked doing was the research on a specific topic, talking about the studio wrestling days, the importance of Jumpin' Johnny DeFazio and Cannonball Chuck Martoni, their careers post studio wrestling, how they both became involved in politics. Used to be something that I used to be able to tell you who your state rep, your state senator, who your city councilman was, and Allegheny County councilman. I used to be able to tell you all that stuff in a career ago. But it still was really cool to be able to research all that and to have a legacy, to post a legacy of what those guys have done post studio wrestling.
As Ken's in the chat talking about that, he says the most quickest and most detailed results of wrestling show anywhere. How does he do it while the match is in progress?
Well, it's kind of a shorthand, and I try to do the best that I can. If somebody has 12 wrist locks, I'm not going to be able to designate all 12 wrist locks, but I can tell if somebody follows up a wrist lock with a hip toss or something along those lines, and just try to have it as accessible as possible. Sometimes for me, finding photos to go along with some of my stories are probably some of the toughest difficulties, especially since my wife doesn't attend anymore. She used to take pictures from the stands. So, but
so you're kind of like me. Cool. You just kind of rope in the wife to do a job as well, right?
Well, this is wife number 2. She, much like the first one, could do whatever she wants, and this one has decided to stay away, and that's just fine by me.
Yes, I haven't chased mine away yet. She's usually occupying the DVD table, or if I'm short a camera person, we're like, hey, can you do hard cam for me tonight?
The funny thing is that Marion is actually a very good photographer. She used to do photography for her kids' yearbooks and things like that. Very talented in many ways, and photography not being the least of which.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So you'll go from that. You talked a little about studio wrestling. Obviously, you've done a lot around it, right? So and we're going into this class. Tell us a little bit about the CCAC class and kind of how it came about.
Sure. I attended the Extraordinary Life and Times of Bruno Sammartino in the spring that was held by Christopher Cruz, the former WCW announcer, and Chris came up for 2 classes, and the second of which Bruno attended. And we had a real good time. And he also said, we had some talks about maybe extending it, doing something a little different in the fall, maybe something a little bit more encompassing. So stupidly, I was home one day, and I decided to reach out to CCAC, and I called, and they answered the phone. And I said, I attended the Extraordinary Life and Times of Bruno Sammartino. I'm interested in perhaps hosting a class in the fall. That would be great, she said. Can you send me something? So I sent her something, and lo and behold, before I knew it, I'm in the catalog. So, and we have more than twice the minimum needed. So I have to teach the class.
There you go.
So it's been a life. It's the more I do the research, I see that some of the groundwork has been laid in some of the stuff, like the Chuck Martoni and Jumpin' Johnny DeFazio piece that I did, and some of the stuff on Bruno Sammartino in the past, and some of the other stuff along the way. but to also be able to research. And one of the things that at the CCAC class, they talked about Bruno and him coming over from Italy and starting in 1959. And I'm thinking, pro wrestling was around before 1959, and it was before studio wrestling. And my exclusive to you, Sorg, today is studio wrestling did not begin in 1959. You look at some websites and you see a date that says November 15th. And it's always been asserted that it was 1959. Well, I went and I looked to see, was November 15th, 1959 a Saturday? It was not. So I started to ask around to some people that are much more learned than I. And no one said that studio wrestling actually started on a Sunday. So through my research, I've discovered, and this is your exclusive, studio wrestling started in November 15th, 1958. So there you go for your documentary. Free of charge.
There you go.
So it started in 1958 at what is now WPXI, at WIIC. So what I've also been able to discover is wrestling. There were wrestling matches in the city. I'm trying to find more information about the building. I've looked at so many buildings that I can't remember the name of it. There was one, I believe, close to the Point that used to be down at the Point. The earliest wrestling show that I could find was at this building down near the Point in prior to 1900.
Wow.
And there were 3 matches or something like that, and I have to find that again. It's in my notes, but that's the earliest one. But I'm going to make note of that, but then we're also just going to start from 1900. 1905-ish, there seemed to be a lot of Ed Strangler Lewis was here. Gorgeous George Wagner was here in like 1949, 1950. Wow. I've been searching Mildred Burke, who was Mae Young and who was the Fabulous Moolah before Mae Young and the Fabulous Moolah. She was here at the Duquesne Gardens, which used to be over in Oakland back in the day. State-of-the-art facility. It was a hockey facility. It was a dance ballroom. It was a boxing venue. It was a wrestling venue. And then almost overnight, it became an obsolete facility because of just the advancement of things that were happening at that time. Jeez. And there were a bunch of different locations. The Islam Grotto, which was around where Allegheny Center, the aviary, that area. That's where that used to be, on Montgomery Avenue, 107 East Montgomery, I think it was. And then Chris Korbelic, I hope I'm saying his name right, and I were just recently discussing about the Arena, which was another wrestling venue. It is near where the Animal Humane Society is on the North Shore by Western Avenue. I think it's the 1000 block. Used to be I think the police station is close to that now. In that area, there was a venue called the Arena that there was wrestling back in the day. There used to be, as you know, the KSWA was at the Lawrenceville Moose for years. We just recently had our 100th event at that location. That's not the only Moose Hall in the city of Pittsburgh that had a wrestling venue. Earlier than that, in the 20s or the 30s, there was a couple of shows at a Moose Lodge that was on Penn Avenue. Now that charter is now in the Penn Hills, not Penn Hills. It's near Shaler, Aspinwall area. Lodge 46 is that lodge now, but the physical location was on Penn Avenue, and they had some wrestling back then too. So this was all before Fineview. It was all before WIIC. And, the Grotto was a place that Angelo Poffo wrestled. Wow. And just these great names.
And of course, Angelo Poffo, the father of
Correct.
Macho Man and the
Lanny
Genius.
Poffo, yeah.
Lanny Poffo.
So a lot of guys came from Chicago and wrestled here. Another thing that I've discovered was, I hate to tell people that, we talked about, historians that think 15 years ago was, groundbreaking. Or 20 years ago I was once at a show where we talked about introducing the combatants in the main event old school, bring them out, their music comes out, they stand on each side and you introduce them as they're in the ring, and the kid goes, "Oh yeah, old school ECW." And I'm sure that it was decades before Rocky and Apollo Creed fought in Rocky in 1976. It was an old boxing thing before it ever became a wrestling thing, 100 years ago. But I've lost my train of thought. I thought I was going to get back to it. But these great facilities, and a lot of these guys came from Chicago, and a lot of the promoters were boxing promoters as well as wrestling promoters. They did a little bit of everything when it came to that.
And at the time, didn't that cross over a little bit?
Yes.
Especially early 1900s, probably, right?
Yeah, there was, because there was a lot of football players after their football playing days were done. They either went into boxing or more likely wrestling. I think the state athletic commission at the time had a lot to do with that too. I recently found an article, I think it was 1957, that the state was trying to deregulate some of the laws and rules that allowed for more wrestling shows. I think that there was a time that there was an ebb, and there's always an ebb and a flow, but I think it was the interest in wrestling was down a couple of years before Gorgeous George was here in 1950. And there's other characters that I found along the way that are just very fascinating. And there were Al Abrams was a sports columnist for one of the many Pittsburgh papers back in the day, and there was a writer that wrote to him and asked about why they don't cover wrestling more in the paper, and they did a lot. It's amazing that they did that. But the guy said he likes his, and this was 1949 maybe. Yeah, I think it was 1949, and the columnist wrote back that he likes his sports a little bit more legitimate. 1949.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been allusions to the fact that it may not be the most legitimate of sports, whatever we bring to whatever we individually bring to the table or collectively. The fact of the matter is there were some questions on whether or not it was legitimate 70 years ago.
So not a new thing,
That's right. That's right.
I always joke that in school there was like being told Santa wasn't real, and wrestling was the thing I still held on to.
Yeah, that's right. It was always funny too. My mother, again, she worked at a facility in Evansburg, and they brought in a guy to talk to some of the people that at her workplace, and the guy was a former professional wrestler, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. My mother doesn't remember his name either. And afterwards, my mother walked up to him and said, "My son's a big fan of wrestling." And the guy looked at her and he goes, "It's fake."
Oh no!
Why would you say that? Why would you say that?
Wow! Especially a guy that did it.
Yeah,
too.
A guy that at least for some time, I think he was a jobber of some sort.
Jeez.
On.
Oh, that's why I was a little bitter.
I think he was a little bitter. I think so.
Jeez. Wow. So it sounds like so tell us, is the class how many sessions is it?
Two classes.
Okay.
October 11th and October 18th.
Mm-hmm.
CCAC North Hills, Perrysville Avenue. You can find it in the catalog. You can find it on the CCAC website. It's $49. I didn't make the price. $49, and we have more than the minimum, which really surprised me because I'm really nobody. You know what I mean? I'm a guy that loves it and had been blessed with all kind of opportunities, and to be able to share some of my knowledge and talk to. I'm still surprised when people contact me and say I'm signed up for your class, and it's like that's awesome. October 6:30 to 9:30, so you should be able to get up there after rush hour.
And it feels like something that like the class I've seen on Facebook a lot, especially the Studio Wrestling group, things like that. People actually several times this week I got sent, did you know they're doing this class at CCAC? And I'm like, yeah, the teacher's going to be here Thursday. so it and not circles, casually wrestling fans, things like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it has gotten a bit out there.
Yeah, it has. There was a story the Incline posted on my 50th birthday on Monday. So it was that was a birthday present for me, and I had a nice article. This is a great opportunity here. I've always wanted to visit you and to visit the show. And I have an interview tomorrow, and I had one earlier today. But it has been terrific. Bill Powerhouse Hughes has been a champion of one of the most original columnists that we have in Western Pennsylvania, the Herald Standard. He has been having a little note about the class each and every Sunday, which is terrific. I was emailing a columnist in the Johnstown area, asking if they would at least acknowledge that a hometown kid was doing this class, and of course they weren't interested because it's 2 hours away, but he had read Powerhouse Hughes's column, so he knew that it was out there. So that's great. It's quite far from that readership area, but with the internet, the column has been shared a bunch, and he's a great guy. Have you ever been to a CWF show back in the day when Powerhouse had his shows down?
I've been to the venue. I've met Powerhouse, so I'm familiar with them. Yeah. Whether
you like him, don't like him, I always liked Bill. We're Vulcan brothers. Tell you together. But he was the only guy that I had ever gone to an independent show. He was the promoter. At the end of the show, he stood at the door and he shook hands with everybody who left. Mm-hmm. It's a class act.
Absolutely.
So, we try to thank people as much as we can, but maybe I should at FanFest this year. I don't know, but we always, he's a class guy, and I'm blessed to have as much coverage of the class as I have.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really, really hope this does well. Maybe we'll have a second one. Huh?
That's what I was thinking, because I've communicated with Chris Cruz, and Chris is hoping to bring the Bruno class back in the spring.
Good.
He wants to do a 3-day class. He talked about doing a 3-day class last year. Why he would want to drive from Baltimore 3 times to do that, I don't know. But, he can do that, and as much interest as this has received, I'd be more than happy to do it again next fall as well, once we get all the kinks out and that sort of thing. But it would be a lot of fun to do that as well.
It could be a whole curriculum.
Say that again?
It could be a whole curriculum in the end.
It may be in a credited class by the time it's over.
There you go. Time to go back to school, guys. All right. Well, hey, you've been at this for a bit. You've been around indie wrestling a long time. Tell me what the best and the worst thing about indie wrestling is. Oh, the best and the worst. Can I go with the worst first? Sure. Because that has always been, it's the best story, actually. Okay. I have been blessed to work not only with the KSWA since 2005. I was VOW's first announcer back in the day. Adam Montgomery is a good friend. He wasn't able to be at that first show, and I understand that's why I was asked. He was the ring announcer after that until life gets in the way sometimes. And I've pinch hit at PWX. And Generations of Pro Wrestling was in the Overbrook area a couple of years ago. You and I and about 5 others were there. It's all available on YouTube on my personal account, by the way.
And one of the best opportunities that I've had for storytelling, nonetheless, was I worked at Legends Pro Wrestling in Wheeling and Moundsville at the time, and I picked up Brutus the Barber Beefcake for a show. And he was Brother Brutai. He was arrogant from minute one. And I picked him up. I was able to pick him up, and I drove him to the venue, or to the hotel, rather. And he was just, you couldn't talk to him. He didn't have anything to say. And I had the best opportunity that I had in that same promotion. I took Lex Luger around 10 years ago this month, and that was 3 weeks before he had his spinal stroke.
Jeez.
And he was terrific. On a scale of 1 to 10, he was a 13. He was great. But Brother Brutai, on the other hand, I would take him to the hotel, and he was just so crabby. And I would ask him questions, and he really was curt with his answers, and he really didn't have anything to say. And we were on our way to the venue, and he goes, can you take me to Walmart? I got to buy some Polaroid film for my camera. And I said, yeah, sure, And I said, just trying to get anything out of him. I said, you gonna go promote the show, do some cutting and strutting while you're in the Walmart? And he goes, I'm just buying film, man. I'm just buying film. And I left him off at Walmart. I went and I called one of my friends who was on the show, and I said, I'm going to leave him here. I'm going to leave him here. I'm going to take his bag out of my Ford Explorer. I'm going to leave it at the front door of the Walmart, and I'm going to drive away. And then ultimately I decided it was the professional thing to do was to take Brother Brutai back to the venue. So I did not leave him there. I took him to the venue and sped to the airport to take him back at the end of the night. But yeah, that was the worst. That was the worst one that I had. And the best, that they're always topping. Like I said, the Lex Luger, who was just really terrific. We went to a bunch of different steakhouses, and I never picked up a dime. I never had to pick up a tab. He picked up everything. And we were at a steakhouse, and everywhere we went, they recognized the total package. And we went to this steakhouse, and we're sitting there, and the waitress comes over, and she goes, I understand that we have a celebrity here. And Lex goes, yeah, I'm just happy to be here with Tom. And the waitress says, yeah, the chef has picked out the steaks for you guys. He went through and he personally picked them out. And Lex says, bring them out. I'd like to say hi. So you see this young kid come out, and Lex Luger's just talking to this young kid. And you could see that he was, he was so happy. And he's probably still telling that story to this day, much like I tell the story. But he was just so genuine and loving to all the fans. The fans were trying to burn WWE to the ground at the time, and Lex is like, Vince is just a businessman, and he's a family man, and he cares about the business, and he cares about family, and he was just positive the whole time, and that was really good. Some of the other good times I had, we just had Demolition Axe, his last singles match, a Brawl Under the Bridge, the biggest event we've ever had. That was earlier this summer. And to be able to see Mitch Napier, our champion, hoist Brohemoth up before his Sioux Falls Slam and hear 600 people go, all at the same time, that sends chills up your arm and down your spine, and to have so many people tell that. And just the simple things that people we have diehard fans, and they'll tell you if something stinks, but they're just there to have a good time. And when they tell us that they've had a great show, they've had a great time, that ties it all the time. I'm not one of these guys that has to, I've thrown around some, big names and stories, but sometimes it's just to have a great show that flows, and people are sometimes they're sent home angry at the end, sometimes they're sent home happy. Years ago, Double A turned from a good guy to a bad guy, and I've heard the story many a times. A family friend their daughter had a AA poster on her wall. She went home and tore it down, ripped it up, and threw it in the trash. How do you beat that?
That was her Hollywood Hogan moment.
That was
right?
her Hollywood
Yeah, I
Hogan
mean,
moment. That's right.
How many people threw out their red and yellow stuff when that happened?
That's right.
But it's just as big as something like that.
Oh yeah,
seeing that.
Yeah.
So
and another story that we've always loved was there was a kid in Lawrenceville, and he was going to one of the elementary schools or whatnot, and he had maybe a John Cena T-shirt on, and he went to the nurse, and through the grapevine we know the nurse, and the kid went into the nurse's, and the nurse said, John Cena's on your T-shirt. John Cena, your favorite wrestler. And the kid goes, no, La Lucha. And it was the biggest name we had back in 2005, 2006. That's when that happened. He was our top babyface at the time. Yeah. And you can't forget things like that. We had posters. From time to time, we have photographers come in, and they'll take posters, and we'll get posters made and whatnot. And we had Biker Al. Biker Al was a guy that actually I was in a tag team match against, when I was a long time ago. But anyway, there was a Biker Al poster that somebody had overseas in a barracks, in one of the Army barracks. And you have a Biker Al, in an American military facility, a Biker Al poster. You can't beat that. That's pure Pittsburgh. That's pure Americana.
That's amazing. I mean, it really is ingrained here, isn't it?
It is.
That's what I love about it. I love that energy around it and everything. And that's why, and I don't talk about KSWA much on the shows because I have a kind of a, I know we have viewers all over the place, so you have a kind of if it's online, then it's out there. But if you're in Pittsburgh, like there's just a different energy.
Oh yeah.
When I run into people and they're like, there's wrestling in Pittsburgh, and I'm like, you have no idea about wrestling in Pittsburgh. There's wrestling in Pittsburgh, south of Pittsburgh, east of Pittsburgh. There's everywhere, and everybody has their feel to them.
Sure.
And that KSWA kind of vibe, especially like at Spirit Hall, I know I've been to a few times this year. Yep. And everybody's got a blue ribbon in their hand and and throwing them back. So it's got a whole different kind of vibe than any of the other shows in the area.
That's what the Incline. The article I did with the Incline, I think that they touched on that. We talked a lot more about that in the story itself, where really within 30 minutes of where you live in metropolitan Pittsburgh, you can go to a show.
Absolutely.
You can go to a wrestling show. I've been to RWA. I've been to IWC. I've paid for a ticket everywhere I go. I go, what did I miss? IWC, PWX, the first one I mentioned, RWA. I've paid to go see all of them. They all have their vibe, and they all have passionate fan bases. I'm certainly not going to say you're wrong for going to this show. You're wrong for going to this show. Whatever you want. And
different vibes of wrestlers that they attract on the roster too.
Oh yeah,
as well. So I think that's really cool. That's really cool.
A guy like Chris LaRusso, who I consider a friend. A guy like Jack Pollock, who I consider a friend. These guys are, working at different facilities. Rick Diamond Black Diamond over on West Virginia.
I still got to get down to a Black Diamond show. That's on my list.
I nearly went to their anniversary
Me
show.
too. Something came up.
Yeah, so I just, I couldn't find anybody to go with, really. Yeah. At the spur of a moment on a Sunday night. It's a little different. But I have a great respect for what that guy's trying to do out there, because I had a little taste in West Virginia. And, Wheeling is a town that could be, you have enough resources, and Rick just now got himself a new building. This is something that you can build on. And once you have, those resources at hand, you have an opportunity to build something. And, Derek, who I consider a friend down at RWA, he does his own thing down there. They were lucky enough to bring guys like Sanjay Dutt in. Sanjay asks around. He tries to get on different shows. But they've done a great job of, cultivating their fan base and their roster. And, PWX is a great learning ground for a lot of these guys. That's what I consider, that's what it can be whatever. Is my opinion the only one that matters? Absolutely not. People can do whatever they want. But that's that. IWC is a great. They travel a little bit. Clearfield and their base is in Elizabeth and that sort of thing. And I have some friends and I've known some people down there. People can like whatever they want. If you like the great technicality of a particular wrestler, go see that wrestler.
I was putting together a project, and I need to get it out there a little more for PittsburghWrestling.com, like a calendar, because I saw this in SoCal when I visited there, and I'm like, oh, this is a great idea, And just with the wrestling, I plugged in all the dates for everything that was within an hour drive of Pittsburgh, and you can literally go see a wrestling show.
Oh, sure.
Every weekend, I think at the time, through up until Thanksgiving, I think it was.
Yeah.
So like that's pretty cool. That's something you can do as a wrestling.
Oh,
fan.
Sure. And you can see all kind of. Like I said, you want to see somebody that's technically sound, or do you want to see, somebody like Lord Zoltan that does some great in-ring psychology before you're ever even locking up?
Right.
There's something for everyone to enjoy, and especially in Western Pennsylvania, you don't have to go too far to see it.
Nope. That's why you can see a lot of great talent on your Monday nights from Pittsburgh too. Who are you watching these days? Is there anybody that's got your attention out there, either on the Indies or anybody on TV that's really kind of sticking out that you're seeing out there?
I do try to watch wrestling on Monday nights. I'm still spoiled because I watched every moment of Raw and Nitro back in the day with Sting and all those guys. I really don't watch intently. John Cena's fun to watch. I'm not a fan of Roman Reigns. I think that it's just not. He's not a classic good guy, and I'm a guy that likes good guys versus bad guys. That's what wrestling's about. Braun Strowman, how cool is Braun Strowman?
Jeez, yes.
The guy's nearly 7 feet tall. The guy's nearly 400 pounds, and can drop kick and just do some
having classic matches on a regular basis with the Big Show. When's the last time you got excited about anybody being paired up with nothing against Big Show? Yeah. He's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
But when's the last time you got excited about seeing somebody get paired up with him for a main event?
Yeah.
Like multiple times in the last 6 months, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm perplexed on Monday nights. I'm perplexed as to what happened to Bayley, because here was somebody that was supposed to be the female John Cena, and it just hasn't happened. On the local scene, we talked about. I've never seen Laura Lovelace work a wrestling match, but the bits and pieces that I've seen, she's very funny, very smart, and seems to be very talented in what she does. I would like to see her wrestle someday. I don't travel to a whole lot of shows anymore, but from afar I really like what she's doing. There's a couple of other younger girls that are coming up as well that I'm waiting to see what happens with them, because as you know, sometimes not to throw shade on somebody, but sometimes people are flashes in the pan. They're here, they're here 1 minute, gone the next.
Right. Especially in pro wrestling.
Especially in pro wrestling. On the independent scene, like I said, Jack Pollock is a guy that I've seen and watched from afar. Chris LaRusso, we're geographically from the same part of the state. He's from Altoona. I'm from Portage, which is only about 15 minutes away. Another guy that's wrestled with us a little bit was the Gavel, David Lawless. He's a very talented guy. MV Young, who really, he could have been a KSWA heavyweight champion, could have been a champion in any federation he wanted. Sometimes life goes a different way, and he has his last match in Pennsylvania for now with us on Saturday night. He's moving to Florida with his family down there. His family needs him down there. And so kudos for him for stepping up to help with his family when needed. He's a guy that's talented. Remy LeVay is a talented guy. The Jester, Keith Hott. How great of a talent is Keith Hott? He's just a fun. I don't know if there's very many more good-hearted guys than him out there. And then, new for us, Bubba the Bulldog debuted, loved his time with us. I know that Dennis Gregory has been around for a long time. Dennis is a terrific talent still, and he has been a great addition for us. And then, our talent, I don't know. I've written, I think I've coined the phrase that Lord Zoltan is the most important independent wrestler to ever come out of Western Pennsylvania. I still believe that. A guy like T. Ranchula and Betty Esper are in a picture in Pittsburgh Magazine, the October issue, from Brawl Under the Bridge, because T. Ranchula drove his motorcycle to the ring with 84-year-old Betty Esper on the back.
Oh, wow.
For the main event. The place went absolutely berserk. And, that's a picture that's, when you have a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer like Martha Ryle come to take photos 2 years in a row at an event. And then, it's a project that she'd been working on for some time, and now it's in Pittsburgh Magazine. It's unbelievable, and it's very fortunate to be able to do stuff like that. Another guy that's on our roster and is a personal favorite of mine is the face of Pittsburgh, Dr. Devastation, Lou Martin. Here's a guy that the two-time champion, multi-time tag team champion, reinvents himself as the face of Pittsburgh, and he's in the video on the ABC News video where Michael Konings is gauging the voting, whatever people wanted to vote for the presidential election, and he bursts in because he's the face of Pittsburgh. Vote for me. They're still a lot of my favorites. And another guy that he's never going to win any kind of championship based on, he's not Lou Thez in the ring. He's not. The King, Del Douglas, is somebody that on the apron, cheering on his tag team partner or agitating his opponent. I'm sorry, there's nobody anywhere better than him at doing that. And he, we were lucky enough, there was a photographer at Millvale Days on Friday night, and they had a picture of action in the ring, and you see Del Douglas's face in the corner just screaming at the photographer. It's terrific. It's just a fun photo. And whatever people like in wrestling, and that's what I like in wrestling. People can like whatever they want.
That's awesome.
And if somebody wants to dive from a 20-foot balcony and miss a guy on a table. If you want to do that and you like that, who am I to say that's not what you like?
Somebody said something up a couple shows ago, and I'm just like, are you trying to recreate that video? But anyways, thank you so much. It's been awesome. We could go another couple hours at this, I'm sure. Tom, again, we're going to check out the show, and at the KSWA and the class.
Well, KSWA, check out KSWA.net that's the official the website of the Keystone State Wrestling Alliance. KSWAdigest.com is my blog, has all the features, has all the news, reviews of the shows, that sort of thing. You can Google CCAC, it's probably .edu. And find the history of professional wrestling in Pittsburgh class, October 11th, October 18th, 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. And we hope to see you there. And anywhere you live in Western Pennsylvania, if you're watching this anywhere and you're interested in pro wrestling, find a show near you that's not too far. Chances are very good that the prices are going to be a lot better than what you're going to pay at a gigantic venue. Go and see the local product, buy T-shirts, whatever the merchandise they have available, support the indie wrestling wherever you want to see it, because you're going to find something that you're going to love, not just like, you're going to find something you're going to love regardless of what you like in the way of the style.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Again, check out the show, check out everything. And just like we always say, until next time, support indie wrestling.
You know how I act now. If you got a problem, come and see if I'm a back down. Act wild. Steady sipping check now.
This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.